Okay, today we're going to be practicing rounding to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100, okay? So we have a number line that I have some hundreds on. I gave you the number 671. So first of all, we have a little rhyme that we do when we're rounding. If it's 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, one more time. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. And I'll explain that as we go through these problems, okay? So we have 671. First, I'm gonna round to the nearest 10. So when we say round to the nearest 10, you have to think of tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Those are our tens. So I'm going to look at just 71. So I'm going to circle the tens place because that's what I'm rounding to. I'm going to underline what's next door. The ones place is next door, and that's going to determine if I go up or down. Okay? So if it's 5 or more, raise this score. If it's 4 or less, you let it rest. So 1 is less than 4. So you're going to let that rest. When I say let it rest, that means it just stays the same. So 671, when we round to the nearest 10, will be 670. Okay? When we look up here at our number line, 650, 660, 670. And 671 would be like right after it. 671 is way closer to 670 than it is to 680, okay? So we're gonna let that rest. So this 7 is resting because that 1 says to let it rest. It's closer to the 7 tens than the 8 tens. So now we're going to round to the nearest hundreds. So I'm gonna change colors. So we're going to round to the nearest 100. So when we're counting by hundreds, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 are hundreds. Circle the hundreds place. And you have to look next door. So next door to the hundreds is the tens place. You have the 7 tens. So remember, 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. This 7 is 5 or more, so you have to raise the score. I'm going to put an up arrow. So that means I have to raise the score of this 100. So when I round to the nearest hundreds, it's going to be 700. So remember, when we're rounding to the nearest 100, your answer choice is always going to be 100, 200, 300, 400, etc. Okay? Because they're hundreds. When I look up here at my number line, 671, again, is right here. You see how here's 700, you only have this little distance to go. Whereas 600 over here, you have this long distance to go. So it's way closer to 700 than it is to 600. So that's why you have to raise the score, and that 600 will round up to the 700s because it's closer. Okay, let's try the next ones. So down here, I start with 300 and I end at 500. Okay, the first number, 319. We're going to round both of these numbers to the nearest 10 and also to the nearest 100. So I'm going to start with 319. I'm going to first round it to the nearest 10. So I'm going to circle the tens place. And then I have 1 10. I look next door at the ones place. There's a 9. So 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. This is bigger than 5. I have to raise the score. So 319, and when I look up here at my number line, here's 350, 300. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So I'm counting in increments of tens. So 310, 320 is right here. 319 would be just right before it. So 319 would be closer to 320 than it is to 310. So raise the score. That 1 will go up. The 3, this 100 will stay the same. This 1 will go up to 2. And then, of course, your 0, you put a 0 in the ones place because, again, when you're rounding to the nearest 10, 10, 20, 30, you don't have any ones. Your ones place will always be 0 when you're rounding, always, okay? If you notice, ones place 0, ones place 0, ones place 0. So just remember, when we're rounding, your ones place will always be a 0, no matter if you're rounding to the nearest 10, hundreds, thousands, okay? So now we're gonna round this to the nearest hundreds. I'm gonna circle my hundreds place, I have a 3. I look next door at my tens place, there's a 1. 5 or more, raise a score, 4 or less, let it rest. That's a 1, so I have to let this 3 rest. When it rests, it stays the same. So 3, and these 2 digits after it just turn into zeros. Because again, when we're rounding to the nearest 100, you have to have a 100 answer, 100, 200, 300, etc. And when I look at my number line up here, 319, right here, it's that far away from 300, but it's this far away from 400. You can see that it's way closer to 300 than it is to 400. So 319 rounded to the nearest 10 is 320. And then 319 rounded to the nearest 100 is 300. Okay? Next one, 447. First, we're going to round to the nearest 10. Circle my tens place, look next door. I have a 7. So am I going to raise the score or let it rest? I'm going to raise the score. So this 4, I'm going to raise the score. What comes after 4? 5. So your hundreds place will stay the same. My tens place will go from a 4 to a 5 because I have to raise the score. Because 7 ones is closer to the next 10. You got to go up. Of course, my ones place just stays a 0. So 447. When I look up here at my number line, here's 400, 450. So right before 450 will be 447. 47 is closer to 450 than it is to right here, 440. So 447 rounded to the nearest 10 is 450. Now we're going to round it to the nearest 100. So this time I'm going to circle my hundreds place. I have 4 hundreds. Look next door at the tens place. I have 4 tens. Are we going to raise the score or let it rest? We're going to let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So this 4 in the hundreds place is going to rest and stay a 4. Because in the tens place, this 4 means to round down to the nearest 100. So 400. And when I look up here at my number line, here's 450 right in the middle. Well, 447 is less than half. When it's less than half, it's got to go down to 400. It's closer, it's almost halfway, but it's not. It's closer to 400 than it is over here to 500. Okay? So anything less than halfway, you're going to round down. If it's 5 or more, so halfway or larger, you're going to round up. Okay? So that's the strategy that I like to do when I teach rounding. If it says round to the nearest 10, circle the tens place, underline the ones place next door. 5 or more, raise a score. 4 or less, let it rest. If you're rounding to the nearest 100, then circle the hundreds place, underline what's next door, the tens place. And again, go through that. 5 or more, raise a score. 4 or less, let it rest. And remember, when you are rounding, you will always have a 0 in your ones place. And if you're rounding to the nearest 10, then you're counting by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40. Now, if you have a 3-digit number, it could be 420, 430, 440, but you still have the tens and the ones is counting by tens. And if you're rounding to the nearest 100, then your answers are 100, 200, 300, 400, and so forth, okay? A number line definitely helps you with this. This is why last week when we were practicing our place value, it's very important to understand place value so that you can use that knowledge for your rounding. Now, as the week goes on, it's going to get more difficult. We're going to take our rounding skills and we're going to apply it to adding and subtraction problems where we will estimate the answer. Okay, so work hard, do great. If you have any questions, just send a message through Dojo. Thank you guys. Have a great day.